Now, I've never played a Resident Evil game or anything from the survival horror genre, but I always enjoy trying new things, so this should be fun, as always. I'll be splitting this review into 3 parts, these being personality, gameplay, and story. Also, there will be major spoilers throughout the review, so you have been warned. Let's go. Straight out of the box, this game wants you to know that it's For a first-time player of the series, the game started out presenting itself as dark, cruel, and serious. From the characters to the settings, everything felt really gothic and cold. And after the first hour or so of gameplay, I just knew that I was in for one terrifying ride. Until the game started throwing this at me.
My daughters and I will live in
Way ugly! I want to see! He's awake!
Brother, shut the fuck up! You're the one who's arguing with Miranda's decision!
You wouldn't know responsibility if it was Willie.
Oh, keep glory! One day your head will actually fit your ego!
Don't make it a saying this.
Silence! My decision is final.
Something about this game just feels out of place. The graphics look so real and the coloring and atmosphere help ooze a scene of tragedy, but the storytelling and gameplay make it feel like you're playing a high-end simulator of Scooby-Doo episodes. There are mysteries to be solved, bad guys to annoy, chase scenes with bad guys who are laughably tragic at catching you. Mixed in with generic action/horror Hollywood tropes like the floor breaking at the worst moments, coincidentally finding safe paths, and surviving unbelievably bad situations. It's a mixed bag of different feelings. It can capture the horror feeling well at times, but also feel cheesy and generic in moments where the game seems as if it's trying to take itself seriously. I'll explain more in other parts of the review as we go along, so with that being said, let's go on to the gameplay. Now, before I get to the core elements of the game, I just want to take a bit of time to reflect on what it was like playing a survival horror game for the first time. I made so many beginner mistakes. Some of the funniest was challenging Lady Dimitrescu and her goons to an all-out brawl to the death. After running out of all my resources except for around 3 shotgun pellets, which mind you were intended for a last hurrah, my friend finally told me that some enemies you just have to run away from.
Wait long.
I'm out of bullets. I'm out of health, and I have only a knife and the lady's outside. Oh, I think I got an idea. What? Yeah. So you can't kill her now? So, for a while, I became too conservative with my ammo, using mostly the knife in situations where it would be more efficient to just shoot the enemies, which got a bit frustrating. Oh, freaking every time. Oh. No. I was gonna talk about how bad my aim and blocking were at the start, but to be honest, the more I looked through the recorded footage, I realized I didn't really improve that much by the end of the game. Freaking hell. How did I miss that? Oh, I suck so bad. Are you That's it. This guy. Woo! You know what? Fine. There you go. Man, I hate the lichens so much. But anyway, now onto the core elements of the gameplay. Generally speaking, there are 3 core elements of gameplay in Spooky Village, these being exploring, horror, and action. Exploring the world and its small details was one of my favorite parts about the game. Maybe it's because the game looks visually impressive, but the world and setting, for the most part, kept me interested throughout my playthrough. Each area, although mostly covered with snow, had enough personality that correlated with each boss. And by the end of the game, I found myself missing the slower and more quieter moments that just involved exploring houses or solving puzzles. Speaking of which, the puzzles aren't too complex, but some do require outside of the box thinking to get them done. Though I do think some specific ones were a bit unnecessary, like the wheel and ladder ones from the fish boss. The next core element of gameplay is the horror. Now, I really didn't know what to expect, but what I got did leave me a bit disappointed. It's not that the game doesn't do horror well, it just focuses on the wrong things in my opinion. I think Village really shines in the moments where the game doesn't hold you by the hand.
About to get loud.
Yeah, I know, I see the guy friggin' in front of me. Every time the game put me in the terrifyingly impossible chase situations is when I felt the least anxious, because no matter what, I know I'm gonna be fine if I just run forward. They also put little effort setting these chase scenes up. Sometimes you can see them coming from a mile away.
Shut your fucking hole!
Sorry. Take a seat. Listen,
Right
Ethan,
next to the open... Oh, whatever.
I said sit! Last time you freak, I swear to God!
fuck you.
That is... no way. It's
Last
too
chance.
predictable.
You don't want to find out what's in that hole. I'll take my chances.
No way.
You're furious.
Don't sit next to the freaking... oh, whatever. Oh, hello.
I'll take my chances.
It just feels like a cheap and lazy way to progress the adventure in a quote-unquote spooky way, which I did get kinda sick of by the end of the game. I felt way more scared when the game doesn't obviously show you the correct path, rather when your own decisions determine the outcome. And this usually occurred during the exploration of the main areas or when fighting against normal enemies and mini-bosses. For example, the mutated baby monster part, with the mix of the increasing tension in the atmosphere and the rush of trying to find a place to hide, really helped the authenticity of horror. Most of that part didn't even have enemies, it was purely atmospheric. Another good example of this is Lady Dimitrescu while you walk around the castle. She can come into mostly every room even if you just finished fighting one of her daughters in it. Just knowing from the sounds of her footsteps that she's nearby made me much more tense than any of the chase sequences. The game also does have quite a few jump scares, but I didn't get too bothered by them. Holy shit! Oh, hello. Oh, I'm going now.
Looking to fish for the
Okay, whoa! You freaking... Jump scares, freaking piss off. The last core feature of the gameplay is the action. The guns are done well enough, and it was really fun finding new weapons as you progress through the game. And I love the upgrading system. It was coordinated very well with your progression through each area. The guns also felt different to one another. I think the PS5 adaptive triggers helped with that a little bit as well. My favorite gun was probably the sniper, since it rewards those hard to hit shots that I would very rarely get. The regular 1911 pistol also felt really nice to use. Although the guns felt good, I do think they overstepped the number of action sequences by the end. It was just constant action after the fish boss, which was enjoyable for a time, but by the end, I did want a good break. I freaking want some of this.
big guy.
Holy shang! Now, the core action functionalities are mixed in with a bit of horror, which is fine, but I do think there are some glaring problems. Firstly, Ethan runs slower than the average toddler, and I get that they wanted to have a fine balance of horror gameplay and action, but I do think this design choice limited the intensity and intimidation of some enemies and situations. I feel that the slowness and the general inadequacy of Ethan to move and climb made the whole game have this overarching handicap feeling. You really start to feel it with the bigger mini bosses, guys with big axes that run too slow and whose charge axe attack can be stopped by two bracing hands. Not to mention the main bosses of the game. These guys, man, it feels like they're physically challenged at successfully killing you. Like, they have so much opportunity, so much advantages, but they just can't finish the job. Obviously the story would be over if they do win, but it's too unbelievable for a game that looks real and feels like it should be taken somewhat seriously. Even in these over-the-top action cutscenes or quick-time puzzles, they never fail to put these almost died close calls that don't make me feel any sort of actual tension or threat, because most of the time it's all scripted anyways. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Oh, that's not good. Did I just wish the bosses felt and moved around more believably, instead of being so oddly static or handicapped while they shout all the generic "I'm gonna kill you" quotes.
Just give up! Your time belongs to Roses are only home! I need your flesh!
It's Ethan, and a bloody demise!
Shot him in the eyeball.
They'll die like the world's watching. Impressive.
To be fair, as much as I don't like the fish boss's character, his fight probably was one of the most complex, since he constantly made you run around, he brought up barriers, shot acid rain, and had ranged attacks. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy anything from these boss fights or action moments. Many parts, like the Lycan Lair, had me on the edge of my seat, but I do feel that they can be easily improved on with a bit more effort and thought put into them. Alright, just quickly on the game's performance. I was playing on PS5 and the game ran a smooth 60 frames, 4K, just fine, with only a few drops in frames at very specific moments. Also, pop-ins were noticeable here and there, and some animations could have been smoothed out a bit. But honestly, these are such small nitpicks that it's nothing to worry about. The game never crashed, froze, or had any major bugs, except for this one Zombozo guy who really didn't want to get back up. But other than that, the game works just fine from my experience. Alright, now for the story. So the story was good. I wasn't blown away or very bored. It was somewhere in the middle that kept me interested through the whole journey. Spoiler warning again, but basically what happens is Ethan Winters is living in a waifu simulation, but then Chris Hemsworth and Bravo 6 bust in, Louisiana, destroy the simulator. What? How's she not dead yet?
On my food.
Actually, it's a good thing. She's my wife. Take the baby.
What the hell you doing with my daughter?
And denies Ethan.
Ethan, no.
Which basically starts the core of the story, taking out the main bad guys to hopefully get the baby back. These bosses are...
Man blood.
Lady, supersized bitch. Fuck that! Ugly ass psycho. Fuck that! And I'm on a freak. Fuck!
Get my flask.
Self-centered prick.
I mean, fan with legs is going crazy. Where the heck did he go? Oh. Which is, by the way, Capcom's interpretation of our very own Overwatch hero concept that we sent right to Blizzard a few years back. Except Capcom's version is fan with legs, while the original is legs with turret. Anyway, continuing. The final boss is... Mother Galshin, please smell our prayers. Then...
Long story short, Miranda's fucking a supersized bitch. I don't give a damn about your personal issues.
Then...
Everyone died. The end.
All in a day's work for Chris Redman. The mystery and more subtle lore of the world is something I really appreciated. For example, the books that you find on the way, and the environments that have a bit of hidden lore within them. Also, the first 4 main bosses each had a very interesting concept to them, but were overall the most inconsequential to the overarching story, since all they do is wait for you to come and take them down. All 4 are just a test for Miranda to see if you're worthy of being with her family, I think. Again, this is my first Resident Evil game, so I know I am missing a lot of details, and this is the 8th installment in the franchise, so they kind of have to make throwaway characters if they want to continue a long story. But I just feel that each boss in Village was killed off as fast as they were introduced, except for Heisenberg, who ended up having the strangest boss fight in the game. But again, it all doesn't matter since everything you accomplish as Ethan all ends up exploding in the end, except for Rose, who is probably the only significant story item to have come from the narrative. It also comes down to the threat that the bosses pose to the characters, as mentioned in the gameplay section. You never feel any intimidation or presence from these villains, since they constantly remind you of how incompetent they are. For example, sometimes they literally give you a chance to run away. I think things are pretty evil now.
7, 6, 5, 6, 7, 6, 3, 5, 2, 6, 4, 5, 3, 2, 6.
Or they can't see you through mirrors.
Because he is in my castle and has already proven too much for my daughters to handle.
Or the other near misses I mentioned before. Just listen to my live reaction after Dimitrescu slices off your hand. If she can't catch a guy with no hands now, I don't know how she's gonna do anything in the story. This turned out to be true for most of the main villains. Except for Miranda when she shows up and takes your heart, which leaves the player feeling a bit defeated, but also cheated out since the other bosses just couldn't do a similar job even when coming so close. On top of all that, you have the weird choices in dialogue that I'm sure everyone watching this has already heard of by now.
I don't give a shit about your family drama.
Father?
Elena, no. That's not him. Not anymore.
Stupid idiot! What are you doing to my cute friends?
Again, it's not that I didn't enjoy playing through the story, but similarly to the gameplay elements, I feel that the characters would have turned out less generic with just a bit more care and effort into their roles and significance to the story. Again, I can't say much on the story since it is my first entry and I might be getting many things wrong, but I thought I had to say that because basically all of the game revolves around the story. After the 12.5 hours it took to finish, I felt that I had experienced most of what the game had to offer. Even though with many criticisms, as a first time experience with the survival horror genre, and with the series, I did enjoy my playthrough of Resident Evil Village. Although it did get a bit repetitive with the action sequences at the end, overall I think it was a good next gen experience for first timers into the genre. It's not amazing or terrible, it's good enough for at least one playthrough in my opinion. Though if they take more care into how horror and action/thriller sequences play out, I think it will drastically improve the game's quality, instead of relying mostly on cheesy action horror tropes as an excuse. People say that Resident Evil 7 is more focused on horror, so if you guys really want me to sharp my pants, I'll consider reviewing it as well, but I'll see how this video does first, and I do want a small break from reviewing horror games. But with that being said, this has been The Hero of Sinnoh. Thanks for watching. Oh my god, oh!